What you're seeing here is an abandoned Amish schoolhouse. At one time, you could hear the voices of Amish children throughout this building, but no longer. So, what happened here? In this video, I'm going to give you a closer look at this school, including what it looks like inside. I'm also going to explain how did it come to look like this today, and also why you're seeing an electric bulb on the outside of this Amish schoolhouse. So, what happened here? Well, this schoolhouse is located in northeast Arkansas, near the town of Rector. An Amish community once existed here. Today, this is an Amish ghost settlement. These photos are all by Don Burke, who visited this area back in 2014. So this is an example of an Amish community which failed or went extinct, essentially disappeared. So the Amish are constantly growing, and they're usually adding 1 or 2 dozen new communities yearly. There are over 600 Amish communities throughout North America. But at the same time, some of them simply don't work out for whatever reason. They may not have been able to attract enough people to the community, maybe couldn't make a living in that area. This community, Don explains, actually started in May of 2009 when Amish began moving here. The Amish Yoder family was the first one who moved here from Indiana. This family had a bakery, there was a greenhouse here. Later in November, a minister came to the community, which is actually good for Amish communities because you need to have a preacher, church leader for it to survive. Gradually, a few more families moved here over time. In 2010, 3 more families moved in. So you can actually see in some of these photos remnants of this community. What you're seeing here is an old mailbox, and if you look closely, you can see the name Yoder, which is a typical Amish name. Still visible on this mailbox. Don also got a shot of the yellow buggy warning sign that was still up at the time. So this community managed to attract several families in those early years. Of course, one of the things you need in a community is a schoolhouse. The Amish typically school their children from 1st through 8th grade, and then after 8th grade, they end their formal education. The first year, they only had 1 family with school-age children, and they were actually homeschooled. The following year, they already had more families, so they needed a schoolhouse. And what happened was they took a neglected building in the community. It's called, as you can see on the sign, the Crockett Community Building. And they turned that into a 1-room Amish schoolhouse. In that school year, 2010, 2011, they had 8 Amish scholars, as the Amish call their pupils or school children. And one of those graduated from the 8th grade that year. So what happened here? Why does this look like this today? Well, just 5 years after the first settler moved into this community, this became an Amish ghost town. According to a local non-Amish pastor, the Amish there decided to leave because they didn't attract enough other Amish people to join them. You know, for an Amish community to thrive, it needs to grow over time. What happens in these cases, and what happened here, was that the individual families went different ways. Some of them moved back to their original places they came from. Others went to different communities. So the last known Amish resident of this area was one of the Hostetler family, who was basically just waiting for his farm to sell before he'd be able to move. And as you can see in this photo, the place had finally sold, and thus the last Amish residents of this short-lived community moved on. So that's what happened with this community. But the most striking remnant here is the schoolhouse. This being a former community building owned by non-Amish, that's why you see the light bulb out front. You know, if they're just using a building, they're not necessarily going to remove that stuff, light fixtures and things. So if we look inside, we can see some definite signs that this was once a school. The main thing here is these old style desks, or the one-piece desks that are typical even today in Amish schools. And we see several of them here in these photos. There's a couple other interesting details to me here too. You also see what looks like church pews in here. And I don't know if that's something that would have been there at the time when this was an Amish school. It could be the case they were added later. You also see some old mattresses in here as well. Another example of what I was talking about, you have an electric outlet here on the wall. It's doubtful that this building would have been wired for power. They probably had gas lamps or some other form of lighting that the Amish used when this operated as an Amish school. This building has a very eerie look. I think it captures the idea of an Amish ghost settlement. So it's interesting to see these remnants because the Amish have lived in many places in North America. There were once Amish settlements in places you wouldn't expect, like Alabama. There was a community in California at one time, over 100 years ago. There was even a settlement in Mexico. For whatever reason, these communities don't always succeed. The Amish end up disappearing from the area, and they leave remnants behind. And over time, those remnants and traces will disappear too, including this schoolhouse. You know, and it could be the case that in some of these ghost settlements, after a long enough time, all that really remains are the gravestones of anyone who may have passed away while the settlement was in existence. But if you go to those places, you may still be able to find some remnants of those communities, like in these photos. So thanks to Don Burke for sharing these. Let me know what you thought. Talk to you soon.